What if I told you that one man's dream of endless wealth, a fantasy of gold and luxury once, brought an entire nation to its knees? A financial revolution that promised to rescue France from bankruptcy ended up destroying it. It wasn't Bitcoin. It wasn't Wall Street. It was paper money born from the imagination of a Scottish gambler, fueled by royal greed and drowned by public hysteria. This is the story of the Mississippi Bubble, the grand illusion that bankrupted France long before the French Revolution ever began. And if you think we've learned from it, you might want to stay until the end. To understand the Mississippi Bubble, we must begin with a kingdom on the verge of collapse. At the start of the 18th century, France was broke. King Louis XIV, the Sun King, had spent decades waging wars and building palaces, burning through the treasury like a furnace. When he died in 1715, the country's debt stood at over 3 billion livres, a mountain so high that annual interest payments alone exceeded the kingdom's revenue. France wasn't just running out of gold, it was running out of trust. The monarchy had debased its coins and overtaxed its people, and that's when a man appeared with a dangerous idea that would change everything. His name was John Law, Scottish economist, mathematician, and convicted murderer. Born in Edinburgh in 1671, Law was a brilliant mind obsessed with numbers and probability. But his talent came with a taste for risk. After killing a man in a duel, he fled Britain and spent years gambling his way through Europe's casinos. But Law wasn't just chasing luck. He was studying it. He became convinced that money wasn't gold, it was credit, and that the wealth of a nation depended not on metal and volts, but on the speed of exchange. In other words, if people trusted paper as much as gold, economies could grow infinitely faster. When he arrived in France, Law saw the perfect laboratory for his theory. A nation drowning in debt but rich in ambition. In 1716, John Law convinced the French regent, Philippe II, to let him open a private bank, the Banque Generale. Its mission: to issue paper banknotes backed by gold and silver deposits. But here's the twist. Those notes were far easier to use, easier to trade, and easier to print. At first, people were skeptical, but soon merchants found it convenient. The banknotes held a steady value, even better than the constantly clipped coins. Law's system worked. Trade flourished. The economy breathed again. For the first time, France had found a way to create wealth from confidence, and confidence, as Law knew, could be addictive. But John Law wasn't content with just fixing the currency. He wanted to rebuild France's empire. He proposed something audacious: a company to develop France's colonies, in North America especially, the vast untamed lands around the Mississippi River, then known as Louisiana. Law promised these lands were filled with gold, silver, and fertile fields. He called it the Mississippi Company. To finanzit. The company issued shares, payable in government debt. Investors could trade their worthless bonds for stock in Law's Campania. Clever way to erase national debt while funding a new venture. It was brilliant. It was modern. It was a trap, because the value of the company didn't come from gold mines or trade routes. It came from belief. What began as an economic reform soon turned into a fever. By 1719, the Mississippi Company's shares began to skyrocket. Investors, nobles, merchants, and even servants to buy in. Everyone wanted a piece of the American dream. Newspapers described Louisiana as a paradise where gold could be picked off the ground. People sold their homes, their businesses, and their family heirlooms to invest. To keep the stock price climbing, Law printed more paper money. He needed to feed the demand, and he had the power to do it. His bank merged with the Mississippi Company, and he now controlled both France's currency and its colonial empire. He was, effectively, the nation's financial dictator. But every new note diluted the value of those before it. The economy wasn't growing. The illusion of growth was. Law's theory depended on infinite trust. But infinite trust doesn't exist. Soon, people began to notice that the riches of Louisiana were imaginary. The colonies produced little profit. As one historian later wrote, "Never had so many been made rich so suddenly and so soon ruined afterward. The bubble reached its peak in early 1720. John Law was now Controller General of Finance, the most powerful man in France. But whispers began spreading. Was the company really worth anything? Was there even gold in Louisiana? When the first investors tried to cash out exchanging their paper for gold, the bank hesitated. Then it stopped redeeming notes altogether. Panic erupted. Crowds flooded the streets, desperate to withdraw their savings. Law ordered limits on withdrawals, then outright bans. Within weeks, the paper money that once symbolized France's salvation turned into worthless scraps. By May 1720, the Mississippi bubble burst. Fortunes evaporated overnight. The streets of Paris fell silent, except for the sound of anger. The crash devastated France's economy. Thousands were ruined. Merchants went bankrupt. Trade collapsed. Inflation soared. John Law fled France in disguise. A man once celebrated as a genius, now branded a criminal. He died years later, penniless, in Venice. The Banque Generale was shut down. Paper money was outlawed. And for decades afterward, the word credit became taboo in France. It wasn't just a financial collapse. It was a psychological wound that shaped French distrust in banking for generations. Some historians even argue that this trauma helped sow the seeds of the French Revolution half a century later. You might think this story is just a relic of history, but look closer. The same forces that built the Mississippi bubble: speculation, debt, confidence, the idea that you can create wealth simply by believing in it are still alive today. Sound familiar? From the dot-com bubble of the early 2000s, to the housing crash of 2008, to the crypto and NFT mania of recent years. Every age has its Mississippi. Every generation believes this time is different. But human psychology doesn't change. We still chase the dream of effortless wealth. Let's look at the numbers. During the Mississippi bubble, the money supply in France tripled in just 2 years. During the U.S. monetary expansion of 2022-2021, the money supply increased by over 40% in 18 months. In 1720, people traded in coffee houses, betting on paper shares. In 2021, millions traded on apps, betting on memes and tokens. Both times, the same logic drove the crowd. This can only go up. And both times, it didn't. When modern bubbles burst, inflation, debt, and a loss of confidence follow. The technology changes. The psychology doesn't. Financial bubbles all follow the same rhythm. First, innovation, new idea promises untold riches. Then, euphoria, early profits attract the crowd. Next, mania, everyone jumps in and valuations soar. Then, doubt, the smart money quietly exits. Finally, collapse, confidence breaks, and panic follows. John Law's innovation was paper money. Our modern ones, digital assets, AI stocks, and derivatives. But in every case, the bubble ends the same. Not with a crash in value, but with a crash in trust. Despite the disaster, John Law's ideas didn't die. He was wrong about execution, but right about potential. His theory that money is a tool of confidence became the foundation of modern economics. Central banks today operate on similar principles: controlling credit, adjusting liquidity, and managing trust. In a strange way, the Mississippi bubble was both a failure and a prophecy. It destroyed France, but also laid the groundwork for the financial systems we use today. Every time a central bank prints money, it's echoing John Law's experiment. So what can we learn from the Mississippi bubble? First, confidence creates value, but only when it's backed by reality. Once faith is lost, no amount of printing can save an illusion. Second, innovation without restraint breeds destruction. John Law's ideas were revolutionary, but without limits, they became dangerous. Third, human nature doesn't evolve as fast as technology. No matter the century, our emotions, fear, and greed drive markets more than logic ever will. The Mississippi bubble was a mirror, showing what happens when a society confuses speculation with prosperity. And if history teaches anything, it's that bubbles don't end when prices fall. They end when people stop believing. Today, our financial systems are larger, faster, and more complex, but at their core, They still depend on that one fragile thing. So the next time you see an investment soaring beyond reason, remember John Loth, the man who sold a fantasy and bought a catastrophe. Because when confidence becomes currency and dreams replace discipline, the bubble is already growing. If this story made you think differently about money, history, or human behavior, don't let it fade like the paper of 1720. Share this video. Subscribe for more deep stories of economic illusions and financial revolutions. Because to understand the future, we must first uncover the bubbles of the past.